Russia's entire justification for 4 years of documented war crimes, for bombed maternity hospitals, for missile strikes on school buses full of children, villages reduced to rubble, and called liberation is denazification, fighting fascism, protecting the sacred memory of 1945. Years of calling Zelensky a Nazi. And then what you're about to find out is he didn't walk into a war. He walked into a 350-year-old trap. 1676, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed IV, ruler of one of the most powerful empires on earth, sent a letter to the Zaporozhian Cossacks demanding their submission. He listed his titles: conqueror of this, lord of that, master of everything between here and the edge of the known world. Designed to make resistance feel not just dangerous, but insane. The Cossacks gathered around the table and wrote back. And what they wrote is largely unprintable. The essence was, we are not afraid of you, and here's the precise and colorful description of what you can do with your demand for submission. They were laughing hysterically the entire time they wrote it. The Sultan actually never psychologically recovered from this letter. Here is why they could laugh like that. Why a letter demanding submission produced not fear, but a writing session. The word Cossack comes from the Turkic word Kazakh. It means free man, not a soldier, not a subject, a free man. That was the entire identity before it was a military designation, before it was a historical category. It was a declaration of what they refused to be. These were the men who created one of the first democratic constitutions in the world. In 1710, Constitution of Philip Orlik, decades before the American founding fathers put pen to paper. They elected their hetman. They built councils where the leader answered to the people. They constructed a military republic on the radical idea that no king, and no Tsar, and no Sultan, and no emperor had the right to own another man's freedom. They didn't fight imperialism because they were told to. They fought it because submitting to it was physically incompatible with who they were. You cannot occupy people whose entire identity is the refusal to be occupied. That is not a political position. That is not a wartime slogan. That is 350 years of DNA. Repin spent 13 years painting that moment, every laugh line, every raised fist, because he understood this wasn't folklore. This was identity. The painting currently hangs in the Russian Museum in St. Petersburg because Russia has spent its entire existence stealing Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian history, Ukrainian identity. They stole the painting. They claimed the story. They even claimed the painter, Ilya Repin, as a great Russian artist. Repin was born in Chuhuiv, Ukraine. Russia stole the warrior, the laugh, and the man who painted them. Everything except what that laugh actually meant. 3 players and all 3 matter. Putin. A man who inherited the ruins of the Soviet Union, a moment where Russia had a genuine choice between building a real institutions, real democracy, or rebuilding on mythology, and single-handedly dismantled every possibility of a real future. It was a gas station of the world, but he reconstructed Russian identity on fabrications, made-up stories, manufactured history, and one lie above all others was the lie that Russia cannot be humiliated. For 20 years, he maintained it with a spectacle. Tanks through a red square, missiles pointed to Washington with American city names painted on the sides. Behind that spectacle were actually journalists, murdered. For telling the truth, opposition leaders poisoned, an entire population raised on propaganda so absolute that millions genuinely believe that they're fighting Nazis in a country that's led by a Jewish president. That is not an accident, though. That is a machine Putin built deliberately. Donald Trump. Russia did not stumble into American politics. Russia invested decades into the most successful psychological operation ever. It was executed against Western democracy, systematic disinformation, social media manipulation, and the deliberate radicalization of an entire political movement through conspiracy theories that they were absurd. They made rational conversations completely impossible. And after decades of that investment, Russia didn't just get a sympathetic president. They colonized the White House. For the first time in American history, the most powerful office on earth became Russia's most valuable geopolitical asset. While Russian missiles hit hospitals, schools, apartment buildings full of sleeping families. And while that was happening, the White House was not a counterweight. It was a shield. On May 8th, 2026, that shield was activated. Vladimir Zelensky. Putin tried to assassinate this man at least 11 times that we know of. He sent poisoners, snipers, entire special forces units with one objective: eliminate him. He spent billions on propaganda engineered to destroy Zelensky's image, to make the world see a clown, a puppet, an actor playing president, drug addict. I'm sure you've heard of all these because Putin understood something that genuinely terrified him. That a leader who refuses to be afraid, a man who has dignity, a man who leads and protects, is more dangerous than any weapon system ever built. You can buy armies, you can manufacture missiles, you could colonize the White House, but you cannot purchase at any price the courage that walks through a city that's being bombed into rubble, that looks into the camera and tells the largest military force in Europe at the time that we are still here and we need ammunition, not a ride. We will fight. Just this weekend, May 8th, 2026, Putin was operationally terrified Ukraine would strike the Red Square during his parade. If they hit it, Putin's myth that he spent decades building would completely shatter publicly on live television in front of every world leader watching. And those that were actually there, which was not many at all, compared to even last year. Russia went to cry to Trump that if Ukraine disrupted the parade, God forbid, they would launch a massive missile strike on the center of Kyiv. Civilians, diplomatic missions, everything threatened to massacre Ukrainian civilians just to protect parade. Then after he cried about that, of course, he asked Trump to fix it. And Zelensky barely said yes. Then that same night, Zelensky signed an official presidential decree with the precise GPS coordinates of the Red Square, officially permitting Russia to hold its own parade on its own soil in its own capital. You're welcome. The nuclear superpower all of a sudden needed a permission slip from the country that it invaded. This was not a PR stunt. This was information warfare. It worked precisely because it looked like a joke. You don't defeat the myth by arguing with it. You issue it a permit. You don't engage with the propaganda seriously. You process the empire like a building permit application. And you cannot unring that bell. I'm Ukrainian. And what I want you to understand is that you don't mock a nuclear power because you're reckless. You mock a nuclear power because you've already decided that living on your knees and being a slave to said empire is worse outcome than dying on your feet. Ukraine didn't just choose freedom. Ukraine chose to make freedom look like the only option that was ever on the table. That's why Ukraine is not capitulating. And in Russia's political culture, which runs on prison yard logic, death cult culture, death and destruction, definitely not democracy. A Tsar who can be publicly humiliated cannot remain a Tsar. A mocked Putin is a destabilized Putin. The world should be paying considerably more attention to what's going on in Russia. It's all connected, even with Iran. The painting is still hanging in St. Petersburg. Stolen, of course, like everything else Russia built its identity on. The painter was born in Chuhuiv, Ukraine. The story of Ukrainian warriors sitting around a table and laughing at an empire that demanded their submission is now rebranded as Russian greatness and hung on a wall in Russia, of course. They do everything. On May 9th, 2026, Zelensky sat at a table and wrote back. Same table, same letter. Zelensky is the hetman. Putin is the Sultan. Painting didn't capture the past, predicted this exact moment. Russia's entire justification for 4 years of documented war crimes, for bombed maternity hospitals, for missile strikes on school buses full of children, villages reduced to rubble, and called liberation is denazification, fighting fascism, protecting the sacred memory of 1945. Years of calling Zelensky a Nazi. And then Putin needed permission from the Nazis to celebrate defending the Nazis.
Еще раз обращаюсь к военнослужащим вооруженных сил Украины. Берите власть в свои руки. Похоже, нам с вами будет легче договориться, чем с этой шайкой наркоманов и неонацистов, которая засела в Киеве.
Украинская сторона, господин Зеленский, готов провести личную встречу. Да, это я слышал.
Sent assassins, spent billions trying to erase a man whose charisma no amount of money could touch. Now, 5 years later, Mr. Zelensky. The Sultan is still waiting for his reply, and he'll be waiting for a very long time. I'm Slavie, this is SlavaCast World at War. Subscribe if you're new here because every subscriber makes Russia collapse a little faster. Comment, like, up next, I'll be talking about why Trump has zero leverage over Putin and what does that mean for all of us. Make sure you ring my bell so you don't miss any upcoming videos, and I'm gonna sing for you now. I'm kidding. Be brave like Ukraine, God bless America, and Slava Ukraini. Bye guys.